You won't believe what happened when a billionaire CEO walked into one of his own restaurants disguised as an ordinary customer. He thought it would be just another quiet night, but the sound of soft, broken crying coming from the kitchen changed everything, and it's a moment that would not only shake him to his core but also transform the lives of everyone inside that building. It was a rainy evening when Charles Whitman, the founder and CEO of one of the biggest restaurant chains in the country, stepped out of his sleek black car. But tonight, he wasn't wearing a tailored suit or walking in with his entourage. Tonight, he was dressed in worn jeans, a plain jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Nobody would recognize him as the man who owned the multi-billion-dollar empire they worked for. He had been planning this undercover visit for months, convinced he could learn more about his restaurants by blending in with his customers than by reading endless reports in his office. He entered the downtown branch of his restaurant quietly. The warm smell of roasted chicken and freshly baked bread filled the air, and the chatter of families and couples surrounded him. He chose a small table near the back, close enough to observe the staff without being noticed. A young waiter, nervous but polite, took his order with a smile that didn't quite reach his tired eyes. Charles noticed the dark circles under the boy's eyes and the faint limp in his step but said nothing. As he waited for his food, he studied the staff carefully. They worked fast, but he noticed the cracks. A manager snapping at a server, a busboy carrying plates with shaking hands, a cashier faking a cheerful tone. It was nothing he couldn't excuse as the stress of a busy evening until he heard it. At first, it was faint, a soft, muffled sound coming from the kitchen, almost drowned out by the clattering of pans. But then it grew louder, the sound of someone crying, not the kind of crying from a minor mistake or a spilled drink, but deep, broken sobs that carried years of pain. Charles's heart clenched. He excused himself casually, pretending to head toward the restroom, but instead he pushed open the swinging kitchen doors. There, in the corner, sitting on an overturned crate, was a young woman in her cook's uniform. Her hands were still gloved, covered in flour, but her face was buried in them as she cried silently, her shoulders shaking. The other staff avoided looking at her, too busy with their tasks or perhaps too afraid of the manager's wrath. The manager himself stood nearby, arms crossed, his face twisted in irritation. "Get yourself together," the manager hissed at her. "We don't have time for this nonsense. Customers are waiting." Charles froze, his blood boiling. He had spent years building this company with the dream that it would be a place where people could work with pride and dignity. Seeing this cruelty unfold in front of him shattered that image. He stepped forward quietly and asked, "Is everything all right here?" His voice was calm but firm. The manager turned, annoyed. "Who are you? This isn't your business." "Just a customer. Go back and sit down." But the crying girl finally looked up, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the harsh kitchen light. She was young, barely in her 20s. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just a broken bar. I can't take it anymore. I've been working double shifts for weeks. My son is sick at home, and I can't even afford his medicine. I thought this job would help." But a broken bar. Her voice broke again. The room went silent. Charles felt his chest tighten. He wanted to scream, to reveal who he was, but instead he knelt beside her and said gently, "You don't need to apologize. None of this is your fault." Then he turned to the manager, his eyes cold. "And you should be ashamed." The manager sputtered, "Who do you think you are to talk to me like that? She's lazy, always making excuses." That was the moment Charles stood to his full height, pulled off his baseball cap, and spoke in a voice that made the entire kitchen stop. "I'm the owner of this restaurant, and this stops right now." The staff gasped. The manager's face drained of color. The crying cook blinked in shock, unable to believe the truth. Charles didn't yell. He didn't need to. His authority and presence filled the room. He ordered the manager to leave immediately, and then he turned back to the young woman. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Maria," she whispered. "Well, Maria," he said, "you don't have to worry anymore. I'll make sure your son gets the care he needs. And I promise you, from tonight onward, this restaurant and every restaurant in this company will be a place where people are treated with dignity and respect. No more exploitation, no more cruelty." Maria's tears kept falling. but now they were mixed with disbelief and relief. She nodded, unable to speak. Over the next few weeks, Charles took action. He not only gave Maria financial support for her son's treatment but also launched a new employee welfare program across the entire chain. Staff would receive better wages, paid sick leave, and stricter oversight on managers to prevent abuse. It wasn't just about protecting employees, it was about restoring humanity to the business he had built. The story of that night spread quickly. Customers began to hear whispers of the undercover CEO who walked into a restaurant, heard one person crying, and changed everything. The staff who had once felt invisible now walked with pride, and the restaurants themselves began to shine brighter than ever before. And Maria, her son, recovered, and she continued working, this time with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. She would later say, "That night, I thought my world was ending, but instead, it was the night my life truly began." Charles often looked back at that rainy evening. He had set out to simply observe his restaurant. Instead, he had found the soul of his company again, and he realized something powerful. Success isn't measured by profit alone, but by the lives you touch and the hope you restore. So the next time you step into a restaurant, remember this story, because sometimes the smallest sound, like a quiet cry in the kitchen, can change everything.